Good morning, everyone. Today I'm gonna read another chapter of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. Let's continue. Chapter 2. In Memory. Harry was bleeding, clutching his right hand in his left and swearing under his breath. He shouldered upon his bedroom door. There was a crunch of breaking china. He had trodden on a cup of cold tea that had been sitting on the floor outside his bedroom door. What the? He looked around. The landing of number 4 Privet Drive was deserted. Possibly the cup of tea was Dudley's idea of a clever booby trap, because his bleeding had elevated. Harry scratched the fragments of cup together with the other hand and threw them into the already crammed bin just visible inside his bedroom door. Then he jumped across to the bathroom to run his finger under the tap. It was stupid, pointless, irritating beyond belief that he still had 4 days left of being unable to perform magic. But he had to admit to himself that this jagged cut in his finger would have defeated him. He had never learned how to repair wounds, and now he can think of it. Practically, in light of his immediate plans, this seemed a serious flaw in his magical education. Making a mental note to ask Hermione how it was done, he used a large wad of toilet paper to mop up as much of the tea as he could, before returning to his bedroom and slamming the door behind him. Harry had spent the mornings completely emptying his school trunk for the first time since he had packed it 6 years ago. At the start of the intervening school years, he had merely skimmed off the topmost 3/4 of the content and replaced or updated them, leaving a layer or general debris at the bottom. Old quills, desiccated beetle eyes, single socks that no longer fitted. Minute previously, Harry had plunged his hand into this mulch, experienced a stabbing pain in the forefinger of his right hand, and withdrawn it to see a lot of blood. He now proceeded a little more cautiously, kneeling down beside the trunk again. He groped down in the bottom, and after retrieving an old bag of like a feebly between support, Cedric Diggory and Potter Stinks, and cracked and worn out sneak scope and a gold locket, inside which a note signed R.A.B. had been hidden. He finally discovered the sharp edge that had done the damage. He recognized it at once. It was a 2-inch-long fragment of the enchanted mirror that his dead godfather Sirius had given him. Harry laid it aside and felt cautiously around the trunk for the rest, but nothing more remained of his godfather's last gift except pounded glass, which clung to the deepest layer of debris like glittering grit. Harry sat up and examined the jagged pieces on which he had cut himself, seeing nothing but his own bright green eyes reflected back at him. Then he placed a fragment on top of the morning's daily prophet, which lay unread on the bed, and attempted to stem the sudden upsurge of bitter memories. The stamps of regret of following the discovery of the broken mirror had occasioned by attacking the rest of the rubbish in the trunk. It took another hour to empty it completely, throw away the useless items, and sort the remainders in piles according to whether or not he could need them from now on. His school and Quidditch robes, cauldron, parchment, quills, and most of his textbooks were piled in a corner, to be left behind. He wondered what his aunt and uncle would do with them. Burn them in the dead of the night, maybe, as if they were the evidence of some dreadful crime. His muggle clothing, invisibility cloak, potion-making kit, certain books, the photograph album Hagrid had once given him, a stack of letters, and his wand, and been repacked into an old rucksack. In the front pocket were the Marauder's map and the locket with the note signed R.A.B. inside it. The locket was accorded this place of humor, not honor, but not because it was valuable in all usual senses. It was worthless, but because of it had cost to attain it. This left a sizable stack of newspapers sitting on his deck beside his snowy owl. Hedwig, one of each of the days Harry had spent at Privet Drive this summer. He got up off the floor, stretched, and moved across his desk. Hedwig made no movement as he began to flick through the newspaper, throwing them onto the rubbish pile one by one. The owl was asleep, or else faking. She was angry with Harry about the limited amount of time she was allowed out her cage at the moment. As he neared the bottom of the pile of newspapers, Harry slowed down, searching for one particular edition, which he knew had arrived shortly after he had returned to Privet Drive for the summer. He remembered that there had been a small mention on the front about miscegenation of charity Burbage, the Muggle studies teacher at Hogwarts. At last he found it. Turning to page 10, he sank into his desk chair and reread the article he had been looking for. Albus Dumbledore remembered, by Alpheus Dog. I met Albus Dumbledore at the age of 11. On our first day at Hogwarts, our mutual attraction was undoubtedly due to the fact that we both felt ourselves to outsiders. I had contracted dragon pox shortly before arriving at school, and while I was no longer contagious, my pock-marked visage and greenish hue did not encourage many to approach me. For his part, Albus had arrived at Hogwarts under the burden of unwanted notoriety. Scarcely a year previously, his father, Persephone, had been convicted of savage, well-publicized attack upon 3 young Muggles. Albus never attempted to deny that his father, who was to die in Azkaban, had committed this crime. A bit sleepy there, guys, sorry. On the contrary, when I plucked up courage to ask him, he assured me that he knew his father to be guilty. Beyond that, Dumbledore refused to speak of the sad business, though many attempted to make him do so. Some, indeed, were disposed to praise his father's action and assumed that Albus, too, was a Muggle. Had they would not have been more mistaken, as anyone who knew Albus would attest. He never revealed the remotest anti-Muggle tendency. Instead, his determined support for Muggle rights gained him many enemies in the subsequent years. In a matter of months, however, Albus' own fame had begun to eclipse that of his father. By the end of his year, he would never again be known as the son of a Muggle hater, but as nothing more as less than the most brilliant student ever seen at the school. Those of us who were privileged to be his friends benefited from his example, not to mention his help and encouragement with which he was always generous. He confessed to me in later life that he knew even that his greatest pleasure lay in teaching. He not only won every prize of note that the school offered, he was soon in regular correspondence with the most notable magic names of the year. Today, including Nicholas Flamel, the celebrated celebratumist Bathilda Bagshot, the noted historian, and Adelba Waffling, the magical theoretician. Several of his papers found their way into learning publications, and such as Transfiguration Today, Challenges in Charming, and the Practical Potioneer. Dumbledore's future career seemed likely to be meteoric, and only question that remained was when he would become Minister of Magic, though it was often predicted in later years that he was on the point of taking the job. However, he never had ministerial ambitions. 3 years after we had started in Hogwarts, Albus's brother Aberforth arrived at school. They were not alike. Aberforth was never bookish, and, unlike Albus, preferred to settle arguments by dueling rather than through reasoned discussion. However, it is quite wrong and suggest, as some have, that the brothers were not friends. They revelled along as uncomfortably as two such different boys could do. In fairness to Aberforth, it must be admitted that living in Albus's shadow cannot have been an altogether comfortable experience. Being continually outshone was an occupational hazard of being his friend, and cannot have been any most pleasurable as a brother. Well, I think we'll leave it there for tomorrow at the brother part. We'll see you next time, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and bye.